The first thing Parker Brant noticed when he stepped onto the Interstellar Academy's training deck was how dim it was. Not dark, exactly. The lights were on, humming gently above the vast expanse of polished alloy and synthetic turf. But the Academy, built by and for multi-species habitation, had a lighting system that defaulted to a low-lumen, bio-friendly setting. It was bright enough for most species, just not humans. Parker blinked and squinted, trying not to trip over the edge of the mat as he made his way to the gear station. His boots clicked against the floor with each step. Around him, students from various planets moved easily, some chatting in languages he barely understood, others warming up with fluid alien stretches. A sharp voice called out, "Human, you are walking into the wrong lane." Parker stopped. "Oh. Sorry." The voice belonged to Zarnox, a tall, slender being from the planet Virell. Zarnox's skin shimmered like wet graphite under the low lights. Its 4 eyes narrowed in what Parker had come to recognize as irritation. "You cannot see, can you?" Zarnox asked, stepping closer. "Your kind's visual spectrum is limited." Parker adjusted the strap of his utility bag. "We manage." Zarnox tilted its head. "Manage, fascinating word. It implies you are not optimized, but you survive nonetheless." Parker shrugged. "Pretty much." Zarnox's mouth curled slightly, not quite a smile. "I can see perfectly in zero light. My kind evolved in subterranean oceans. Our vision is not only superior in darkness, but we perceive thermal and ultraviolet bands as well." "Cool," Parker said, though the way Zarnox said it made it sound less like a fact and more like a challenge. "I could track you through the void of space without instruments," Zarnox added. "You, however, would need a flashlight to find your own foot." Parker smiled politely and walked past, pretending not to care, but the words stuck. He didn't like being underestimated, not because he thought humans were the best he didn't, but he knew what they were capable of. Resilience. Ingenuity, that stubborn refusal to back down. He reached the equipment rack, pulled off his gloves, and began sorting through the training helmets. None had built-in vision enhancements. Of course not. The Academy's standard was designed for the average interstellar student. Not for someone who could barely make out the floor lines when the lights dimmed to night mode. That evening, Parker sat on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He'd gotten through the obstacle run only because he memorized the layout during the demo. But next week, the layout would change. It always did. He rolled over and opened his personal project locker. Tucked inside were parts he'd been salvaging from outdated Academy tech modules, thermal sensors, light amplifiers, a few adaptive lenses. He'd fiddled with them for weeks with no clear goal. Now he had one. 3 days later, he skipped the midday tactics seminar and locked himself in the workshop under the dormitory tower. The door panel had a sticky hinge, and the lights buzzed like insects. He pulled on his goggles, still just a frame with dangling wires and mismatched lenses, and started soldering. A week passed. He trained, he studied, and at night he worked. He barely slept. His fingers blistered, and he burned through 2 sets of micro batteries before finally getting the sensors to sync with the spectrum filters. The result was ugly, bulky, unbalanced. But when he turned them on in total darkness, the world lit up in sharp contrast and muted greens. He grinned. The following day, Parker arrived at the training deck during low light conditions. Zarnox was already there, speaking with an instructor. When it noticed Parker, it paused mid-sentence. "What is that on your face?" Zarnox asked. Parker adjusted the strap of his homemade goggles. "Something I threw together. You humans resort to tools when evolution fails you." "Yup," Parker said. "That's kind of our thing." Zarnox stepped aside. "Very well. Let us begin." The obstacle course lights dimmed until the room was near pitch black. Parker clenched his jaw, toggled the side switch, and his goggles whirred softly. The world bloomed into clarity. Every panel, every support beam, the slight heat signature of the instructor at the far end visible. He moved swiftly over the first hurdle, ducked under a rotating arm, and navigated through a narrow tunnel. Behind him, he heard Zarnox's soft footsteps, lighter and more precise but slower. He leapt over a pit and landed hard, ankle bending slightly. He winced but kept going. A swinging pendulum grazed his shoulder. He ducked, rolled, and emerged from the course a full 5 seconds before Zarnox, silence. Then slow applause from the instructor around, amphibious being named Glurn. "The human has improved," Glurn said. "Noticeably." Zarnox stared at him. "Impossible." "You could not have memorized that. The course was randomized." Parker lifted the goggles. "I didn't memorize it." Zarnox stepped forward. "You cheated." "Tools aren't cheating. You've got 4 eyes and thermal vision. I've got this." Zarnox's eyes narrowed again. "You constructed that from spare parts." Zarnox turned to Glurn. "He exploited an unauthorized advantage." Glurn shook his head. "There is no rule against visual assistance, only that students complete the course unaided by other beings." Zarnox stood there, unmoving. "What else can it do?" "It amplifies light," Parker said. "Picks up infrared, overlays thermal signatures. It's not perfect, but it works." Zarnox stared. "You made that in a week." "I didn't sleep much." The next few days were different. He wasn't ignored anymore. Students approached him, not just humans. A Drevlari engineer asked about his power source. A Henu student offered him a trade for the lens schematics. He turned them all down. One afternoon, during an environmental survival drill on the Academy's shadow side, a frostbitten zone of permanent night Parker was assigned to Zarnox's team. They were to retrieve a beacon lost in the glacier fields. "Your goggles will fog," Zarnox warned as they trekked into the cold. "I sealed the lenses," Parker replied, "and vented the frame." Zarnox didn't respond. Halfway through the mission, a sudden icefall separated them. Parker landed wrong, pain shooting through his right leg. He lay still, snow drifting over him. He tried to stand. His knee buckled. He cursed, pulled off his glove, and pressed 2 fingers along the joint. Tender, swollen, not shattered but bad. He needed a scan. "Zarnox," he called through the comms. "I'm down, can't move fast." "Location." He pinged his coordinates. The signal was weak. He heard static, then silence. He activated the beacon on his suit, but the low cloud cover would scatter the signal. He needed elevation. He looked up the crater wall, steep, icy, but climbable. He rigged a makeshift crampon from a broken tool handle and started up. Every move sent jabs of pain through his knee. By the time he reached the ledge, his vision blurred, not from the cold, from the effort. He activated the goggles and swept the terrain. There, a faint heat signature. The beacon. He limped toward it, dragging his leg, every step slower than the last. He reached the beacon and pressed the retrieval code. It lit up. Behind him, Zarnox appeared. "You are injured." "Yeah, you should not have moved. If I hadn't, the signal wouldn't have reached the drone relay." Zarnox examined him. "You risked permanent damage. If you're gonna brag about your vision, you better be ready to keep up." Zarnox crouched. "You are illogical." Parker leaned against the beacon. "You get used to it." They returned to base together. Parker's knee was scanned, torn ligament. He was grounded for 6 weeks, fitted with a brace and assigned to simulator duty. The goggles were confiscated for evaluation, but not before Parker secretly uploaded the blueprints to his archive. Zarnox visited once. "You are still not optimized," Zarnox said. "Nope, but your methods are." "Effective," Parker grinned faintly. "Thanks. I am considering constructing a device of my own." "You'll need heat shielding. That sensor gets hot." Zarnox nodded. "You will assist me." "I'm grounded." "I've got time." And that was how the Academy's first cross-species engineering team was formed, because one alien boasted, and one human refused to stay blind. The med center smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic. Parker sat on the edge of the diagnostic bed, adjusting the brace on his leg, while a tall, translucent being from the Thule species ran a cold scanner over his knee. The brace was rigid and pinched when he bent the joint, but the Thule insisted it had the best recovery profile, which seemed to be based more on Academy policy than comfort. "Still inflamed," the medic said without looking at him. "You're pushing too hard. The tissue won't knit if you keep walking without assistance." "I'm using the brace," Parker said. "You're also ignoring the crutches." "I don't like swinging around like a marionette," Parker muttered. "You're not supposed to like it," the Thule replied. "You're supposed to heal." The scanner beeped and retracted. The medic wrote something on his datapad in flowing, bioluminescent script Parker couldn't read. "Brace stays on. No field activity." If you're caught on the training deck again before clearance, I'll have your dorm access rerouted to the aquatics wing. You'll be bunking with the Caleri. Parker blinked. They breathe ammonia. Then I suggest you follow the protocol. He nodded reluctantly and limped out. The corridor outside was busier than usual, with students carrying prototype components and materials. A sign on the wall flashed in 5 languages. Interspecies Tech Exhibition, 4 days remaining. Zarnox was waiting by the lift, holding a container sealed with a lab-grade thermal lock. Its 4 eyes tracked Parker as he approached, but it said nothing until the lift doors closed. You are behind schedule. Nice to see you two. I analyzed the optical array in your design. The thermal overlay was misaligned by 4 degrees. Yeah. There's lateral drift when the surface ambient drops below -40. Zarnox nodded. We will correct it. Parker glanced at the container. What's in there? Spectral gel. Synthesized from Lathari plankton, it modulates refraction across variable wavelengths. We use it in planetary mining suits. Will it burn through the housing, if improperly applied? Yes. Parker raised an eyebrow. Great. They reached the workshop, a long, narrow space tucked under the south wing of the academy. The lighting flickered slightly from a cracked ceiling panel, and the air carried a faint burnt metal sent from a failed battery compression last week. The only other occupant, a squat, orange-skinned student from the Attract system, glanced up and then shuffled out without a word. Zarnox cleared a spot on the main table. We begin with insulation. The gel reacts to oxygen. Parker pulled on his gloves. Good thing I've got a busted leg and nowhere to be. The work was tedious. Zarnox handled the gel with long, steady fingers, applying it to the inner lens surface with an applicator shaped like a flower stem. Parker adjusted the wiring array, making sure the signal processor could recalibrate in real time. The goggles were going to be heavier than before, but if the modulation worked, they'd provide dynamic clarity regardless of ambient light or temperature. After 2 hours, Zarnox stepped back. The sensor housing is misaligned. I'll fix it, Parker said, reaching for the stabilizer ring. You are shaking. It's just fatigue. You are not recovered. Your body is inefficient under strain. Parker tightened the ring, and yet somehow I'm still outperforming half the deck. Zarnox tilted its head. Your species compensates through sheer defiance. We call it grit, semantic difference. They worked in silence for another hour until Parker leaned back, rubbing his eyes. We need a field test. You are grounded. There's the environmental sim chamber. Sealed terrain, no staff oversight, Zarnox considered. The one beneath the exo-agriculture wing. You know another, we will test there. Later that evening, after most students had returned to the dormitories, they slipped into the chamber. The entrance was a narrow hatch hidden behind stacked irrigation tanks. Inside, the lights were off, and the terrain had been reprogrammed into a canyon simulation with jagged rock formations and unstable inclines. The whole space was just under 200 meters wide with variable wind and synthetic fog. Zarnox placed a beacon at the far end. Set to emit in ultraviolet bands only, Parker adjusted the goggles. Let's see what this thing can do. He stepped into the canyon. The fog was thick, clinging to the ground in slow, rolling layers. The wind howled intermittently, and the simulated terrain shifted beneath him, mimicking erosion. He kept his balance, favoring his good leg while the brace clicked faintly with each movement. Through the goggles, the world sharpened. The fog parted in luminous streaks, and the beacon pulsed gently in the far distance. He moved along the ridge, ducked under a low overhang, and paused at a narrow ledge. His foot slipped, and he threw his weight back, landing hard against the wall. Pain shot through his knee. He gritted his teeth and steadied his breathing. Behind him, Zarnox called out, "You are injured again." "I didn't fall. You are bleeding." Parker looked down. A tear in his pants revealed a shallow cut along his thigh where a jagged rock had sliced through. The skin was already purpling around the edges. "It's fine." Zarnox moved closer. "You are not durable. You keep saying that. Because it is true." Parker sat down, pulling a med patch from his belt. He slapped it over the wound, then adjusted the goggles and looked back at the beacon. "Let's finish the test. You are stubborn beyond logic. I didn't build these to sit in a drawer." Zarnox stepped in front of him. "You could have asked for assistance." "I don't like being carried." "No, you like being underestimated so you can prove it wrong." Parker looked up. "Is that a complaint?" Zarnox considered for a moment. "No, it is a strategy I am still attempting to understand." They completed the test. The goggles held up through temperature shifts, fog density, and terrain changes. The spectral gel didn't react to the synthetic atmosphere, and the image clarity remained stable. When they emerged from the chamber, Parker's leg was stiff and his shirt was soaked with sweat, but the goggles were intact. The next morning, Parker woke to find his dorm access restricted. The academy had flagged unauthorized chamber use. He was summoned to the administrative office, where a council of 3 alien instructors awaited him. "We have reviewed the logs," said a cylindrical being with no visible mouth. This was an unsanctioned test. Parker didn't deny it. "I needed to verify field conditions." "That is not your decision to make," said another, smaller instructor with fractal skin. "You are healing from an injury." Zarnox stood beside him, arms folded. He was not alone. "I oversaw the test. You are not qualified for independent medical supervision. I am qualified in environmental analytics and structural integrity." The chamber posed no risk beyond what we accounted for. The council paused. "And the device?" the third instructor asked. Parker held out the goggles. "They work." The instructors examined the schematics, asked questions about the gel's stability, the processor's latency, the housing's durability. After 15 minutes, the lead instructor set the goggles on the table. "You will present this at the tech exhibition." Parker blinked. "I thought I was grounded." "You are," said the fractal instructor, "but the exhibition is held indoors." Zarnox turned to Parker. "We will need to improve the casing and the stabilizer ring." They left the office without speaking. Outside, the academy dome shimmered in the morning haze, and the courtyard fountain gurgled faintly in the distance. Zarnox finally broke the silence. "The council believes the device has high interspecies utility." "It's not just for humans," Parker said. "Anyone who needs enhanced vision can use it." Zarnox stopped walking. "You could have kept it for yourself." "I didn't come here to hoard tricks." Zarnox looked toward the exhibition hall. "Then let us build something that outlasts both of us." Parker offered a tired grin. "Deal." The exhibition floor buzzed with the low hum of alien voices, mechanical demonstrations, and the occasional burst of ozone from overenthusiastic plasma displays. Parker stood behind table 47, which was tucked between a rotating exoskeleton prototype built by a pair of Lervian twins, and a biofeedback suit that adjusted its density based on emotional states, a project from a nervous-eyed being that blinked vertically, and offered no explanation beyond a shrug. Parker's new goggles, sleeker and more compact than the test model, sat mounted on a transparent stand. A small placard read, "Adaptive Multispectrum Visual Enhancer Human Origin Interface." Zarnox hovered nearby, silent but alert, occasionally adjusting the angle of the display or brushing away invisible specks from the table with the tip of its sleeve. Its species had little use for pageantry, but Zarnox had insisted on symmetrical layout and exact spacing between each component. Parker tapped the table lightly. "You know, we could have just written night vision goggles and called it a day. That phrasing lacks dimension. Well, so do most of these exhibits. That one over there is just a rock with a fan on it. That is an atmospheric particulate disperser. It's still a rock with a fan on it." At precisely midday, the evaluators arrived, a delegation of 6, representing 5 different species, including the Academy's director, whose upper limbs waved in slow arcs with every step. All wore the black and silver insignia of the Interstellar Science and Applications Council. Behind them trailed 2 human cadets from the Earth contingent, neither of whom Parker recognized, carrying data slates and looking vaguely lost. The lead evaluator, a tall, geometric being with a crystalline exoshell, stopped at their table. "Demonstration parameters." Parker picked up the goggles and gestured to the overhead panel. "We've programmed an uncontrolled lighting sequence. Variable spectrums, randomized transitions, and simulated environmental interference. Proceed." The lights above dimmed, then flickered into a cold blue hue before shifting into near infrared. Parker slipped the goggles on, adjusted the side dial, and began describing the overlay interface while tracking a series of moving targets projected across the far wall. Zarnox added, "The spectral gel adapts to temperature shifts. It reconfigures refraction without latency, allowing uninterrupted visual coherence in low or distorted light environments." The crystalline evaluator looked to Parker. "Your species cannot see in these conditions. Not without help," Parker said. "But with this, we can actually see better than most of the species here." The evaluator's eyes refracted in subtle patterns. "Curious, describe the methods of calibration." "We used a dual-channel sync loop, one for the thermal index, one for light amplification. The processors prioritize whichever signal has higher clarity in real time." Another evaluator, shorter and covered in moss-like filaments, leaned in. "And the interface, neural, mechanical, manual," Parker said. "We kept it simple so it works across species. No implants, no adaptation period. Just put it on and go." The moss-covered evaluator turned to Zarnox. "You collaborated on this." "My contributions were analytical," Zarnox said. "The design and construction were primarily completed by Parker Brant." The crystalline one paused. "This unit outperforms most commercially available vision aids. That's the idea." The evaluators stood in silence for a moment, then moved on to the next table. One of the human cadets gave Parker a quick thumbs up. He didn't return it. Zarnox turned to him. "You are perspiring. It's hot under these lights. It is 22 degrees centigrade." Parker took a breath. "Fine, I'm nervous." "Why, you have already succeeded." "There's a difference between succeeding and being accepted." Zarnox tilted its head. "Acceptance is inefficient. The device functions. That is sufficient. It's not just about function. People still see humans as scrappy, lucky, like we stumble into usefulness." "You did not stumble. You adapted." "Yeah, but they don't know the difference." Later that afternoon, after the evaluators completed their rounds, the Academy held a short debriefing in the central amphitheater. The top 5 projects were presented on the main display, each accompanied by a short summary and a rotating schematic. When Parker's goggles appeared on the screen, he let out a short breath and leaned against the railing. The presenter, an instructor from the engineering division, described the device in clipped tones and cited its unexpectedly high performance to resource ratio. Zarnox leaned closer. "They are saying it is too effective for its simplicity." "Sounds like a compliment." "No. It sounds like confusion." After the briefing, Parker was called to the administrative wing. He walked the corridor alone, his brace clicking faintly with each step, though the swelling had gone down considerably. Inside the office, the same panel of instructors waited. "We have reviewed your project's impact," said the one with fractal skin. "It exceeds initial expectations. I appreciate that. The device has been cleared for limited interspecies field testing. You will not be credited as sole inventor, but your name will be permanently attached to the prototype series." Parker nodded. "Understood. You will also be reassigned from simulator duty." He blinked. "Where to?" "Applied technology mentorship. You will assist incoming students with non-standard solutions." He sat back. "You want me to teach improvisation? You have demonstrated that resourcefulness is not equivalent to disorder," said the cylindrical one. "We intend to explore that distinction." When he stepped out of the office, Zarnox was waiting by the wall, arms folded. "That was not a reprimand. Nope, you are being promoted, apparently." Zarnox regarded him for a long moment. "I have begun work on a new project. Oh, multidirectional auditory enhancement. Our species does not localize sound well in atmospheric environments. I intend to correct that." Parker raised an eyebrow. "You asking for help?" "I am requesting collaboration." He adjusted the strap on his bag. "All right, my workshop or yours?" "Yours has less smoke damage." They walked together through the corridor, past the empty exhibits and deactivated displays. Outside, the evening light filtered through the translucent dome, casting everything in golden hues. "I'm surprised you're still interested," Parker said. "In what?" "Working with a species that can't see in the dark and walks around with damaged knees." Zarnox didn't stop walking. You misunderstand. I am not interested despite those things. Parker glanced over. Then why? Because of them. They didn't speak for a while after that. There wasn't anything left to clarify. By the time they reached the dormitory wing, the last of the students had cleared out. The air smelled faintly of ion lubricant and the citrus oil used by the Zakari custodians. Parker paused at the junction. I've got spare components in the locker if you want to get started tonight. Zarnox nodded. Agreed, but first. What? Zarnox opened its satchel and pulled out a small, flat case. Inside was a new set of goggles identical in shape to Parker's original, but made from a lightweight alloy with etched markings along the rim. I recalibrated the housing for your cranial symmetry. Parker took them slowly. You made these. You should not rely on a prototype for field work. These are more balanced. Also, they do not smell of solder. He examined them, then looked up. Thanks. Zarnox tilted its head slightly. You are welcome. They parted at the dorm entrance. Parker turned the goggles over in his hands, noting the subtle engraving something between geometric notation and personal code. Not decorative, just Zarnox's way of saying, this works, use it. He slid them into his bag and stepped inside. No one was watching. No crowd, no applause. Just the quiet hum of the academy winding down for the night. But it didn't matter. Because somewhere in the dark, Parker could see everything.